Ultra-processed foods are increasingly being recognized as a significant but often overlooked contributor to poor mental health in adults. While most public discussion focuses on obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, the evidence linking these highly engineered, calorie-dense foods to depression, anxiety, and chronic stress is compelling and deeply concerning. The effects are not merely short-term fluctuations in mood after sugar binges. Rather, long-term, habitual consumption of ultra-processed foods appears to actively alter neurochemistry, promote inflammation, and disrupt the body's stress response systems, creating a slow but persistent erosion of mental well-being. Working age and older adults are particularly vulnerable, albeit in different ways, due to the interplay of lifestyle stressors, metabolic fragility, and age-related physiological changes. In working age adults, ultra-processed foods often serve as a convenient source of comfort in a high-pressure environment. Stress, long working hours, irregular schedules, and the constant demands of modern life push many adults toward quick, palatable options: fast food, sugary drinks, packaged snacks, and pre-made meals that provide temporary reward but poor nutrition. These foods are high in refined carbohydrates, added sugars, unhealthy fats, and sodium, and they are devoid of the micronutrients that support neurotransmitter production, such as magnesium, zinc, B vitamins, and omega-3 fatty acids. Longitudinal studies indicate that adults with high intake of processed foods are significantly more likely to experience depressive symptoms, anxiety, and mood instability. The mechanisms are multifactorial. Repeated blood sugar spikes and crashes can amplify irritability and fatigue. Chronic low-grade inflammation triggered by additives, industrial fats, and refined sugars affects brain function, and gut microbiome disruption reduces the production of neuroactive compounds that regulate mood. Over time, the body begins to associate food with temporary emotional relief rather than true nutrition, reinforcing cycles of emotional eating that amplify both stress and poor mental health. Older adults face compounding risks. Aging is accompanied by changes in the brain's chemistry, reduced resilience to stress, declining gut microbial diversity, and slower metabolism. Ultra-processed diets exacerbate these vulnerabilities, increasing systemic inflammation, oxidative stress, and dysregulation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal (HPA) axis, the body's central stress response system. Chronic consumption of processed foods can intensify cortisol dysregulation, leaving older adults more susceptible to anxiety, irritability, and persistent stress. Studies also show links between high processed food intake and accelerated cognitive decline, reduced executive function, and higher incidence of depressive disorders in the elderly. The problem is compounded by social and practical factors. Limited mobility, reduced income, and convenience-driven dietary choices often push seniors toward ultra-processed items, which in turn aggravate mental health vulnerabilities. In older adults, the mental health consequences are intertwined with physical decline, as inflammation, metabolic dysregulation, and cardiovascular stress further diminish cognitive and emotional resilience. The relationship between ultra-processed foods and mental health is also mediated by habitual behavior and environmental exposure. Adults living in neighborhoods with high availability of fast foods and limited access to fresh produce are exposed to repeated dietary triggers for poor mental health. Aggressive marketing of sugary and processed items reinforces their use as emotional rewards, making it difficult to break patterns of dependency. Over time, the neurochemical adaptations to repeated exposure, heightened dopamine responses, altered serotonin signaling, and stress hormone fluctuations create a form of behavioral addiction that ties emotional regulation to food consumption. Adults may find themselves using processed foods as a coping mechanism for stress, depression, or anxiety, even as these foods exacerbate the underlying condition. What is particularly alarming is the long-term trajectory of harm. Working-age adults consuming ultra-processed foods habitually are at higher risk of chronic mood disorders, burnout, and impaired cognitive function as they age. When these habits persist into older adulthood, they intersect with declining physiological resilience, compounding mental and physical health decline. Over decades, chronic exposure to ultra-processed diets amplifies inflammation, disrupts the gut-brain axis, impairs neurotransmitter function, and dysregulates stress hormones, creating a multi-layered burden on mental health. Unlike transient mood dips, these effects are cumulative and can contribute to clinically significant depression, generalized anxiety, chronic stress, and even cognitive impairment. The warning is clear. Ultra-processed foods are not merely neutral calories, they are active disruptors of mental health in adults. Working-age adults face compounded stress and metabolic disruption that fuels mood disorders, while older adults are particularly vulnerable to inflammation, cortisol dysregulation, and accelerated cognitive decline. Over time, habitual consumption of these foods creates a cycle of dependency, emotional dysregulation, and metabolic strain that is difficult to reverse. The cumulative impact can manifest as chronic depression, heightened anxiety, persistent stress, and impaired cognitive function, all of which significantly reduce quality of life and life expectancy. Without urgent attention to dietary quality and mindful intervention, ultra-processed foods threaten not only physical health, but also the mental resilience of adults across the lifespan.